Hey, everybody. Have a little time tonight before I got to head to bed, so I thought I would jump on and see how everybody's doing. Give me just a moment to get everything shared so that other folks have an opportunity to come say hi, and and I will be back. All right. Saludos, Jesus. Hey, ML Brown. Hi there, Miami. Push to the limit. Hey, everybody on Instagram. I am live on a couple of different platforms right now using StreamYard, and I've got a chat going on YouTube as well as on Instagram. I will try to make sure that I am paying attention everywhere. But and then obviously everybody who is on my Discord, who is a member of my Patreon, also has the live stream channel there. Flamethrowing Sherman, what's the topic of convo? No topic. I'm just here to answer questions and see how everybody's doing and just hang out for a bit. But Thaddeus does ask, thoughts on Fantastic Four trailer. I like the 60s aesthetic. I do too, because you get this kind of Jetsons vibe, and then I think that kind of retro futuristic thing has I don't know, it lets them simplify things a little bit. I think the comic accurate costumes and things feel a little more organic in that environment. And then that's also right around the time that that Fantastic Four came out. So I love it. I'm looking forward to I want to see how the CGI works for the Thing. I love that you kind of heard rocks scraping against each other in the one scene that that was shown. So I love Pedro Pascal. I think I'm looking forward to it. I hope it's great. So yeah, I really enjoyed the trailer. Thank you so much for the super sticker, excuse me, Jeremy. I almost said Jimmy. Jeremy, thank you. Elijah says, hey, Dan, I'm considering going back to school to become a hospital chaplain. Any advice? I don't know much about that program, but I have had multiple friends who have gone through chaplaincy programs, and they really enjoyed it. Most of them were going into the military. I don't know anything about hospital chaplaincy, though. So I'm afraid I don't have any advice to give you, but it is a very obviously it's a pastoral thing. If you like helping people, that's going to be your motivator, and I would say keep that front and center so that you stay motivated, because I'm sure you get bogged down in the work, in the assignments, and the research and stuff like that. So I imagine it can probably get a little frustrating sometimes. Sorry, I still have a little cough left over from I think I had the flu a few weeks ago. It stuck around for a while. Have you watched Alex O'Connor on Jubilee? Thoughts on the event? I watched a few of the interactions. I thought he did a great job. There were some things I think could have been done a little different, but yeah, overall, I mean, that's a high pressure environment. I think he did a phenomenal job. Hi, Chris. Celebrating finishing the first draft of my manifesto on Jesus studies, 56,000 words. Also just got your book too. Oh, can't wait to read it. Awesome. I'm glad you were able to get one of the advanced reader copies. Glad to hear about that. And for anybody who's not aware, my book, The Bible Says So, What We Get Right and Wrong About Scripture's Most Controversial Issues, coming out April. I'm looking at 4/29/25, and I thought April 49th. This is just a paperback advanced reader copy. This is not what the final one is going to be like, but I'm glad to hear people are getting copies folks who are doing reviews and social media stuff. Well, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you will give me any feedback that you have. I know you will have some. So, but please excuse me if I have a coughing fit every now and then, like right now. All right, let's see how. Thank you for the super sticker, ML Brown, and as well as Tomo. Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. That's very kind of y'all. You and Brandon Sanderson have done a good deal to dismantle my predisposition against Christianity in general and LDS specifically. My first adoptive family was Mormon. Well, I'm flattered and humbled to hear that. I hope I can continue to be a good representative of my community, even though I don't really talk much about that side of things. As most of y'all know, not all of y'all, I still get plenty of questions about it, but that's to be expected as the audience grows and changes. Obviously, people are not going to have stuck around the entire time or researched everything that I've done. I still get questions all the time about why I use Adonai, and it's like, well, I've had a pinned video for like 2 years on that. Thoughts on Pete Enns? I consider Pete a friend, and I think he does a wonderful job. He's kind of on the more devotional side of things. It's critical scholarship and faith. I am just exclusively critical scholarship without incorporating any faith stuff. So I get a lot of questions about how people can not necessarily resolve or reconcile the two, but at least interact with the two. And that's not my thing. I usually direct people to Pete when they ask about that. So he's got some wonderful books. The Bible says, tells me so. Tells me so? No. The Bible told me so? Tells me so. I think it's the Bible tells me so. Curveball, The Sin of Certainty. He's got a lot of good stuff on there. Thoughts on the Jewish Annotated New Testament by Amy Jill Levine? Phenomenal. Gives a wonderful Jewish perspective and context to what's going on in the New Testament. So if you're interested in the background of the New Testament, can't recommend it enough. Lobotomized Buffoon, thank you so much for the question. Hey, Dan. Hey, Lobotomized Buffoon. Did you see the new open access book, The Samaritan Pentateuch, an English translation with a parallel annotated Hebrew text? I did. I've been familiar with, I think there's another translation that I've seen from that scholar related to the Samaritan Pentateuch. I have a copy for those of you who don't know. In fact, let me just drop it in the chat or something. There's a new translation of the Samaritan Pentateuch that is open access. So, maybe I should just do it in the live thing. Yep. Okay, so I just posted it dropped it in the chat. I'll do that on Instagram as well. If anybody's interested, you can freely access the PDF at that link. Is it possible that Saul actually named Eshbal after Baal? Maybe they were cool with worshiping Baal back then. Also, if the United Monarchy didn't exist, where do you think Saul ruled? It's absolutely possible, because it's not clear that Adonai was the patron deity over Israel by that time period. Very well could have been Baal, who was in the main storm deity pantheon or storm deity role. As far as sorry, there a bunch of questions just popped up. Also, if the United Monarchy didn't exist, where do you think Saul ruled? This is a wonderful question that I cannot find anything anymore. Israel Finkelstein just published a book on Jerusalem that I read. I got through like almost half of it while I was in Vancouver. I don't know where it went. But basically, he would have ruled slightly north of Jerusalem and been like the central hill country, not quite into the northern hill country, and maybe could have extended down and made a play for Jerusalem at some point? If so, that could be kind of the fuzzy memory of a North and South United Kingdom. But Finkelstein's got a lot of good discussions about precisely that question in that book. And then Simone has some issues with the Jewish Annotated New Testament. Boyarin's article about the logo is not representative of consensus, shall we say? Yeah, that's accurate. It's good, but less good than the JSB and the Apocrypha volume. And then somebody asked about Bible translations I would recommend right now on Instagram. The New Revised Standard Version's updated edition is the one that I think is the best translation of both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament together right now. And the SBL Study Bible is the edition that I would recommend. But once the 6th edition of the New Oxford Annotated Bible comes out, which will incorporate the updated edition of the New Revised Standard Version, I may throw my allegiances behind that one. However, the NRSV UE is also incorporated into the Westminster Study Bible, which is an even newer study Bible than the SBL Study Bible that incorporates a lot of essays by, just like the SBL Study Bible and the New Oxford Annotated Bible, it's got lots of explanatory notes. So you see footnotes at the bottom. This is explanatory notes. There are wonderful book introductions at the beginning of every book talking about rhetorical goals, context, all that kind of stuff. And then there are also essays by a bunch of different scholars discussing different things. I would say the SBL Study Bible is a little more critical. The Westminster Study Bible is a little more devotionally focused. But and this one has thicker paper. The SBL Study Bible, it's not the best. Like you can still kind of see through the paper a little bit, but the SBL Study Bible is bad. The paper is very thin. Okay, I've got some a little bit of catching up to do. Shamgar, it looks like you posted something and then struck through it all. So I assume you don't want me to read that. My copy of Westminster was all jacked up. LOL. Deuteronomy 26 went right into Leviticus 8. I didn't notice that, but that would be weird. You said Deuteronomy 26? No, it goes right to Deuteronomy 27. All right, so mine's not all jacked up, but that's odd that you got a jacked up one. Okay, and I'm apologize. I'm leaving comments up. Beyond Doubt Theology, thank you so much for the question. We really appreciate your accessibility and humility and objectivity, Dr. Maklelan. Well, I appreciate that, and I hope I can live up to that appreciation. I'm always fighting to do better. I do my best, but I can't always be perfect at that, and particularly with everything that's going on in the world right now, I'm getting more and more comments, particularly on my personal Facebook page. I don't think people realize it's my personal Facebook page and not a professional page, where they're like, you share too much political stuff. Chiefs or Eagles? Thaddeus asks. I took my daughter to the last show of the Eras tour, so my daughter is rooting hard for the Chiefs. I would love to see something good happen for the Eagles, but so I'll be happy either way. But going back to the famous Simpsons episode, where Homer's where Lisa, it's the Super Bowl with the Broncos, and Homer's got his daughter riding on the game. Wow, what a gambler! I would love to see my daughter happy, so I'm rooting for the Chiefs, and as well, the Chiefs are just having a phenomenal franchise right now. So if they win, I mean, I just love to see that kind of really good football. Wayne asks, thoughts on Marcion and whether his Evangelion preserves a Luke that is earlier than our canonical version. I think it probably does. I think Luke 1 and 2 are probably secondary editions that probably came around or after the time of Marcion. But that's not my area of specialization. I'm kind of listening to friends of mine and other scholars who make that argument. So I couldn't make that argument from scratch on exactly why, but it makes perfect sense to me. But I will have to dig into that at some point a lot deeper. Happy Sky says, does the Bible say being rich and hot makes you happy? I think parts of the Hebrew Bible say that. I think the New Testament is not so big on that. But certainly you can find that in the Bible if you really want to. Being neither rich nor hot, I am trying to make do. Daredevil Born Again thoughts. Maybe could make a series showing the Bible through Daredevil. I would love to see the new one explore Matt's Catholicism a little more. I think that's ripe for exploration in today's world. I think the trailers look good. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. QS6, thank you so much for the question. Are biblical laws weighted differently, like shellfish versus homosexuality? There have been a lot of different ways throughout history that the laws have been weighted. And you have, for instance, the prophetic critique that I talk about frequently that begins with the 8th century prophets, which talk about the kind of performative ritual features of the law not being ends in and of themselves, but being stepping stones to generating a merciful heart and a merciful and just society. And so if you do one and neglect the other, then you are, violating the whole law, so to speak, violating the purpose of the law. So grinding the faces of the poor while you're doing all the other stuff causes God to hate your new moons and your Sabbaths and your offerings and all that kind of stuff. Thus, Hosea 6:6 says, I will have mercy and not sacrifice. And then by the time we get to the New Testament, you have Jesus quite explicitly saying, you tithe dill and mint and cumin and and neglect what he literally calls the weightier matters of the law. So if we take the Gospel of Matthew at its word, then yeah, there are laws that are weighted differently. And similar to the prophetic critique, it's the generation of a just and a merciful and a righteous heart and society that is the purpose of the law. And so the laws that more directly facilitate that or more directly point in that direction have greater weight. Love the fit tonight. Thank you so much. Can't really see Spidey. There he is. Old McFarlane Spider-Man. I got this. People always ask me where I get my shirts, and I just get them wherever I can find them. And this one I bought at the Salt Lake Comic-Con. They call it FanX now because San Diego is like, you're not allowed to call it a Comic-Con. But there was a shop that would always be there called MTC Toys. And this is like the most comfortable t-shirt I own. So I enjoy wearing it. And they weren't there last time I was at FanX. And I always get shirts at the Tower of T-shirts at Comic-Con and online. There are a bunch of great t-shirt shops online. Okay, excuse me. Let me catch up on. Now that I've got 3 different places to look for comments, I'm getting behind even more. I was thinking that Adonai might not have been in the area yet, but then I remember that Saul had a son named Jonathan. Yeah, probably in the area already, but probably just a secondary or tertiary deity, probably not yet the patron deity. The weighting of laws could also just be adduced from the penalties for breaking certain commandments when they are given. Marcionite Super Chat. Oh. Yes, yeah, there are a bunch of different dimensions of weighing the laws, a bunch of different ways it could be done. But yeah, you can look at which ones have harsher penalties. And then, you compare Leviticus 18 to Leviticus 20, you got a bunch of penalties for different sexual indiscretions. In Leviticus 18, it lists all the sexual indiscretions and it says, commit any of these things, you'll be cut off. And then Leviticus 20, it's like this penalty for this one, this penalty for this one, this penalty for this one. Some of them say cut off, others say death penalty, others say other things. So even within those 3 chapters, 18, 19, and 20, you have contradictory penalties assessed. Dan, do you read any Image comics? I love Image comics. Comics. When back in the 90s, it was big into Spawn. I got into Gen 13. Not a huge fan of that artist anymore. Turned out to be a bit problematic. Let's see, Savage Dragon. It's called Max. I think it was called Max. Purple guy. Enjoyed that. Yeah, there were a bunch of Image comics that I read. I haven't read a new Image comic in years. I don't even know where they stand right now. Okay. Olive Blake, thanks so much for the question. Have you heard of the Marian apparition at Zetoun? Seems like a genuine mystery, not as easily explainable as the miracle of the sun. Any thoughts? It sounds vaguely familiar, but yeah, I don't think there's anything particularly unusual about this. I mean, there are examples of group hallucinations and things like that that happen. And when you look at all the different photos people have provided, there's a lot of inconsistency. And then there are some obviously doctored images and things like that. So it's interesting. There are unanswered questions that remain, but I don't think that it's evidence that demands some kind of explanation that's not available to us. There are a lot of ways to explain what's going on there. What is the importance or validity of the Mary Magdalene writings? Well, for a lot of people, the writings are phenomenally important because they have a lot to say about the role of women in the early church. Now, the Gospel of Mary is probably not authentic. It's probably not historical. It's a lot of people would identify it as Gnostic. Other people would say it doesn't have any indication of Gnostic cosmology. So that's kind of the clearest indicator of Gnosticism, and that's just absent. But we also don't have the whole text. So yeah, but it certainly has a lot to say about the role of women in the early church, although the Gospel of Mary does seem to have Peter kind of denouncing her. There's clearly some misogyny going on there, but then Jesus ridicules Peter for that. But at the same time, the Gospel of Thomas is kind of like, hey, guess what? You're all going to turn male when you are saved. So Gnosticism was inconsistent in that regard. And so the texts have different approaches. But for the best person to go to for Mary Magdalene, that would be Elizabeth Schrader Polzer, who's done a bunch of wonderful work on Mary Magdalene and other women in the New Testament. And we had an interview. We interviewed Elizabeth for the Data Over Dogma podcast a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. So if you want a great discussion about Mary Magdalene, I would check that out. Josh, thank you so much for the question. Do we have evidence for 12 disciples existing? Like no direct evidence. There's no material remains or anything like that demonstrate the existence of 12 disciples. But I think most scholars would say there was probably a small group. Whether or not it numbered 12, we can't really be sure. But certainly there would have been close disciples. Anthony says, love Tom Stark's book. Can't wait to read yours. Thank you so much. I assume you're talking about his book, The Human Faces of God, which is a phenomenal discussion of inerrancy and why it's problematic. Thank you for the very kind words, by the way, people. I'm sorry if I'm scrolling past. I've got a lot of comments. I want to try and get to them all, and particularly folks who have paid to have me see their comments. Shamgar says, hey, Dan, with regard to Saul's kids, do you believe the Bible to accurately report his children? I mean, I don't have a reason to doubt Could Jonathan be a literary creation or even a renamed child, i.e. Eshbal and David being friends in old traditions rewritten with a Yahwistic name? Probably a dumb question, but Sadib got me wondering. Not a dumb question. Important questions to ask. I don't know that we have enough data to say for sure. I think somebody could come up with a theory of how that would have come to be that would certainly get a hearing. I think the scholarly consensus is probably going to be that until we have evidence one way or another, we're probably safest just dealing with what we have as probably reflective, if not of the actual situation on the ground, at least some memory that came into being within a generation or two afterwards, I think. Silver says, hey, a live stream. I needed this today. Well, I'm glad to hear that helpful. What kind of LED lights are you rocking? Love the new aesthetic. Very hip. Well, I was, so with the TikTok mini ban, I was like, all right, well, YouTube's going to have to be home base now. And then I was like, I got to turn my camera sideways. I got to figure out how to make this a better product. And I realized that I wasn't distinguishing myself from the background enough. So I got Torgym Video Light RBG, which like it has a dozen different colors and things like that. And I tried a bunch of I got two of them. I tried a bunch of different combinations of colors to see what would kind of just separate me from the background. And then for the lights that are constantly shining in my face, I don't know what brand they are, but it's like a also has a warm and a cooler thing, but they just hang on the monitor. So, and that one just turned off, and now it's back on, and now. So that's the cooler version, and then we got the warmer version. So because I got cooler colors in the background, I thought I'd put warmer colors on my face. I don't know if it's working at all. I'm not an expert at this. I'm just kind of fumbling around, and when I start getting comments about how it looks great, then I pause and I wait. Are your kids your focus group for your thumbnails? No, I try to get my first video in the queue before I take my 16-year-old daughter to school in the morning, and so really. I turn my phone on portrait mode and take a picture where I'm like, and just try to come up with something, and then I just dump it into a saved template and change the wording. And I do not try very hard at that stuff. And I feel kind of silly doing the thumbnail face stuff, but evidently that's what you got to do to get those numbers up, right? Okay, let me see if I can catch up. My mouse has been acting up recently. It's only going left to right. It's not going up and down. Okay. Sentient Soy, sorry for taking so long to get to these questions. Thank you so much for your question. Hello, Dan. Hope you're well. I'm getting there. I've got a lingering cough. I wanted to ask about Numbers 31:36 NIV. Does the tribute to the Lord of 32 people indicate human sacrifice? Wasn't sure if that or maybe slavery. If this is what I think it is probably 31:36. What did you say? 36? 31:36. I don't see. I'm not looking at the NIV at the moment. But 31:36 doesn't talk about 32 people. Oh, the Lord's tribute was, the cattle numbered 36,000. The Lord's tribute was 72 donkeys, blah, blah, blah. Oh, the people were 16,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 32 people. That's 3140. Souls. That could be, very well could be cherem, could be these people are devoted to destruction. This is something that that goes on, and I think they were supposed to have killed everyone and saved only the virgin girls, Now that would have been enslavement. That would have been concubinage or sex slavery. But the other, the Lord's portion, yeah, that probably would have been, they probably would have been killed. But I'd have to look that up to see if there's any scholarly discussion of which I am out of date or unaware to know better. But almost certainly, yeah. Scott Graves, thank you so much for the question. What was the most difficult course you took and on the way to your PhD? The difficult course I took Jewish history from Martin Goodman at Oxford, and that was the only class that I scored below distinction on. And that really made me mad. But it was mainly because the final in that class, which was responsible for the majority of your grade, was just a bunch of handwritten essays. You get like 3 or 4 questions. You don't know what they're going to be. And you go into what they call examination schools, which is this big old building that I think was on High Street. And you're in your gown. You have to wear your subfusk with your white bow tie. And you got to have your mortarboard hat with you. And you're literally just got a handful of pencils and some paper. And you go into a room and they stick you in a desk. And they go, here are your questions. We'll see you in 4 hours. And you and that's it. And then you write your essays. And so that was very intimidating. And I went and looked through all of the questions from like the last 10 years of that course. And so I listed them all. And then I went through all of the questions that could be used that we had discussed in class. And I said, I have to prioritize my time here. So I am only going to focus on the questions that we went through in class. And like only half of them were questions that we talked about in class. The other half were questions we had not talked about in class. So I didn't get the best grade in the world in that class. Although Martin, I have absolutely nothing negative to say about Martin Goodman. Phenomenal, probably the best living historian of Judaism in the world. He's got a wonderful book on history of Judaism. Got a wonderful book called Jerusalem and Rome, or no, Rome and Jerusalem. If you want to know the history of the Rome, Jerusalem, or the Judean War, that's the best book there is on that. But yeah, that was probably the worst. That was probably the most difficult. Didymus, why did Israel choose Adonai as their deity? Israel probably began with El as their deity, and then Adonai probably came in as a second-tier deity when perhaps a group of Shasu people migrated into the central or northern hill country and had Adonai as their own patron deity. And Adonai probably adopted the local storm deity divine profile and came into the pantheon on the second tier. And then my own opinion, there are a couple of different ways that scholars reconstruct what happened next. Seth Sanders, a friend of mine, for instance, suggests that a king, in order to consolidate cultic and political power, decided to take this Johnny-come-lately and conflate them with El so that they would become one and the same deity. That's not unheard of in that time and place in the world. My opinion is that maybe a king who rose to the throne might have been a devotee of Adonai. And in order to achieve the same thing, not lose supporters, but consolidate rule, might have conflated the two deities. And that way you have an aged patriarchal benevolent high deity and a youthful warrior storm deity. And then as you're going through the generations, you're kind of picking up different divine functions and profiles and things along the way to become your Swiss Army deity, your utility deity who can do anything. You need a young, angry deity, you got that. You need an old, nice deity, you got that. You need a deity who can breastfeed and look after pregnant women, you got that too, because we've absorbed Asherah as well. So the God of Israel is kind of just a growing snowball of divine functionality that turns into your all-purpose deity that can respond to any situation and do whatever they need to do. And that then wins out in the marketplace of deities against other deities who are limited in their divine functionality. Koopa, thank you so much for the question. I see you cited Fredrickson's How High Can Early Christology Be in your book. Recently read that and enjoyed it. How did you like it? I love it. Paula is a phenomenal scholar. I love her stuff. She's also got a newer paper in Harvard Theological Review about Paul and Herod and Philo and monotheism, and why she thinks monotheism fundamentally distorts the religious sensibilities of the ancient world. And also, I am honored to have the position of her conference husband, in the sense that when we are together at conferences and we go out and eat dinner, I sit next to her so I can finish whatever she doesn't finish of her meal. So Paula is, there are a few people I have more respect for in this world than Paula Fredrickson. But yeah, I really enjoyed that article. C. Frazier, thanks so much for the question. Hey, Dan, just wanted to say thank you for all the great content and love the new lighting. Thank you so much for the kind words about the lighting. I'm glad I have stumbled upon something something that works for a lot of people. I got a bunch of, oh no, he's a Twitch streamer comments, and I don't really know what that means, but I do kind of get the, I think I have run across in different corners of the internet this kind of aesthetic, this kind of vibe. So I kind of think I know where you're going with that. Silver says law school exams are awful, but at least I was able to wear sweatpants. No, not to an Oxford exam. Most classes, your semester grade is just whatever you get on the final exam. I think that was what my experience was. I did have a class with Alison Salveson, who's also phenomenal at Oxford, and she had like a midterm exam, and then I didn't bomb it, but I did a lot worse than I was hoping I would do. And a very interesting thing about Oxford is frequently after events, whether seminars or midterms or finals or things like that, the professors will go out to drinks with the students. And so I was like, I didn't do as well as I thought I was going to do on the midterm. And she was like, well, it's kind of the formula here where we give you a really bad grade on the midterm just to make you, kick you in the pants a little bit and get you to work harder so you do better on the final. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I like that, but I did do a lot better on the final. Andrew Wilsey9 on Instagram says, I'm curious if James and John being referred to as the sons of thunder could be a holdover from the time when Adonai was portrayed as a thunder god. I would be surprised if that trickled down through the generations and the centuries to bubble to the surface just in their name. I think it has more to do with them being kind of, I don't know about aggressive, but impetuous and bold and things like that. I think that's probably closer to what's going on there. But I think it would be cool to see somebody make a case for that. Can you discuss formless and void from Genesis 1, tohu vavohu? Yeah, formless and void is just the King James rendering. The idea here is desolate wasteland. It not necessarily your material substrate from Platonism, or from an Aristotelian cosmology where it's matter that is without form and function and therefore exists in the realm of non-being, but more like the earth was just a submerged kind of desolate wasteland that lacked form and function, and so was unformed matter, something like that. But yeah, it certainly existed prior to any of God's creative acts. Do you play Marvel Rivals? I do not. I have some friends who do, who love to talk about it, and it sounds like a fascinating game, but I have not taken a video game seriously since GoldenEye. So I think the learning curve would be too much for me, because video games have changed a lot. Like my dad, the only nice thing I ever remember us buying when I was a kid, we grew up really poor. My dad got a Nintendo, an original Nintendo, when it first came out. First people in the neighborhood with a Nintendo. And I found out later when I caught him sneaking into the basement where my brothers and I slept so he could play Arkanoid in the middle of the night while we were all asleep. That's what he bought it for. He wanted to play Arkanoid. But I have a fond place in my heart for games like that. Castlevania, Contra, Excite Bike, Punch Out. Those are the games I really like. And then, played some GoldenEye in college, and that was about it for me and video games. All right, let me try to catch up here a little bit. Thaddeus, just my SBL Bible based on your recommendation. Awesome. I hope you really enjoy it. Milo, Matthew 26:50 translated as question or statement. Let me check it out. There's no punctuation in the original manuscripts. In fact, the earliest New Testament manuscripts don't even have accents or spaces. So then they came, friend, do what you are here to do. Yeah, the only place I see it as a question is the King James Version. Yeah. F. Hopati. It looks like, hang on a sec, let me look at this variant. Huh. Yeah, no, it seems like most everybody agrees it's probably just a statement. Yeah, I'd have to look into that to see if there's a deeper argument, because I'm looking at the King James Version, the NRSV, UE, the ESV, the NET, looking at the Greek. The Greek doesn't really have, it could go either way, but yeah, I'm going to side with statement until I see something that suggests otherwise. Red Falcon, thank you so much for the question. Would you care to commentate on the Office to Combat Christian Oppression being established? That it's, yeah. Let me finish reading your question. This is personally concerning as an Indigenous American regarding religious freedom of Indigenous Americans. Yeah, the folks who are the most aggro about religious freedom don't care about anybody else's religious freedom. It's basically just their freedom to be in charge, their privilege. And so I find just phenomenally misguided and just downright stupid the notion that all of our nation's most minoritized and vulnerable groups, it's wrong to try to level the playing field to give disadvantaged folks a leg up, but it's right to try to further disadvantage those in order to further entrench the privilege and the power of further entrench and institutionalize the systemic power asymmetries of the privileged and the powerful. It's just straight up white supremacy. It's straight up Christian nationalism. It is asinine, and it's going to hurt folks whose religious freedom is actually important. I love the statement that if you're used to privilege, equality feels like oppression. And right now, we have a bunch of wealthy, stupid white men who are freaking out because they feel like they're being oppressed. And the reality is just they're terrified of equality, and they need to grow the hell up. And that's how I feel about that. Are you still doing Hebrew classes? I did it with Jerry Clements. Oh, Jerry's a good friend when I was in A&ES at the Y, but I haven't been good at keeping up with it and need a good refresher. I am actually starting up part 2 of my 2-part Introduction to Biblical Hebrew class. So we did part 1 last year. Everything's recorded. So if you want to access part 1, you can go to my website, maklelan.org, maklelan.org. And I have part 1 available there, all the recordings and class materials. And then we'll be starting to record the classes for part 2 starting on March 3rd. You can also sign up for that if you like. Again, all the classes will be recorded, so you can attend the live classes if you want, or you can do the class asynchronously, or you can sign up and just come back when everything's over and just do it at your own pace. So it'll be, I believe, 28 classes over 14 weeks. There are going to be more this time around that are pre-recorded, so it won't be live recordings. I'll record the class beforehand and just post it on the day, just because I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling for a bunch of different things, including book signing tour and other promotion for the book. And also I've got some family trips and planned, and a conference that I'm going to in Italy. So there will be more pre-recorded classes as a part of part 2. But if you're interested in learning biblical Hebrew, I am offering the online introduction. Hey, Dan. Hey, Ihan. Any connections between the divine names, relic/power, and the commandment to not use the Lord's name in vain? I think so. In my book, Adonai's Divine Images, this is a revised version of my doctoral dissertation, and this is open access. You can access the PDF freely online just by Googling the title. I talk about how the divine name was probably a vehicle for divine agency and presence, and so divine images would have the divine name written on it, and through a ritual they would be activated, they would be enlivened, and then they would presence the deity, they would manifest the presence of the deity. And it probably got to the point that any kind of materialization of the divine name, whether written or spoken, was understood to evoke the presence of the deity in some sense. And so once it became taboo to, speak the name of the deity outside of the temple, and then once the temple was destroyed, then it became entirely taboo to speak the the name of the Lord. And so that's probably how the commandment became renegotiated. It was, hey, don't say God's name in a profane place, even though now all places are profane because you don't want to evoke God's presence in a profane place. However, when the commandment was first written, it was almost certainly about not swearing oaths that invoke the divine name if you either were lying or didn't intend to keep the oath or things like that. So that's probably the origin of that commandment, but it changed over the generations. And I think absolutely the notion that the divine name, whether spoken or written, could evoke the divine presence was associated with the taboo that developed on not speaking it. Thoughts on the FF trailer? I think it looks really cool. I'm really excited to see it. I love the aesthetic. I love I think the CGI for the thing is about as good as it could be. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it feels a lot more comics accurate, and I'm one of those folks who would prefer that kind of thing over the what they've been trying to do recently. Do you have book recommendations about Revelation? Yeah, there are a handful of books that, in fact, tell you what I'll do. I've got a whole bibliography because I taught an online class on the book of Revelation that is also for sale on my website. But I put together a one-page bibliography, and I'll be happy to throw it up on the screen for a minute. I don't know how visible it will be to you, but we'll see what we can do. All right, present, share screen. My mouse is acting up again. Okay, there you go. So let me highlight some things here. Craig Kester's Anchor Yale Bible commentary on Revelation, I think, is the best one out there. It's phenomenal. If you're interested in what does this imagery in this verse mean, that's probably where you want to go, because that's going to go through and discuss every single verse. Brian Blount's NTL commentary is also very good. I prefer Kester's. Beale's Book of Revelation, no, not that one. Timothy Beale, that's the one. Book of Revelation, a biography, is good. And then I will highlight Elaine Pagel's Revelations, Visions, Prophecy, and Politics in the Book of Revelation. But there's a lot of great stuff on there. And so, yeah, that's what I would recommend when it comes to the Book of Revelation. And then I have another website. I know I got to consolidate all these websites. It's called danielomclellan.com. But if you go there, one of the pages is online class bibliographies. So if you didn't like screen grab that or whatever, if you want to go look at other bibliographies for all the other online classes I've done, I've got them posted there. And then I've also got a reading list that one of the folks on my Discord, Hayden, I believe, put together, which was incredibly kind of him. And so that's posted up there as well. So I hope that answers your question. BK201, thank you so much for the question. Why did Christianity keep Old Testament? If Jesus provided the new covenant, it seems it should be obsolete and not taught to be relevant today. Many problems wouldn't exist today with Jesus's words. So that was a debate in the 2nd century CE. People are talking about Marcion, who was an early Gnostic adopter and his is the first real canon that we can really speak of, and he omitted all of the Hebrew Bible. But that was because the part of the Gnostic worldview was that, or at least a common Gnostic interpretation of the Hebrew Bible, was that the God of the Hebrew Bible was a second tier kind of JV squad moron deity, Yaltabaoth, who created the material world in order to imprison these divine sparks in these material bodies, and salvation was about transcending that corrupt and ever-changing material world. And so the Hebrew Bible was a product of a lesser God. And so for him, it was just Paul's letters minus the pastoral epistles. He didn't seem to think they were legitimate, and then his own version of Luke. So that's one take on getting rid of the Hebrew Bible. But you do have part of the pastoral epistles, 2 Timothy, that talks about all scripture is theopneustos and useful for reproach, instruction in righteousness, I forget exactly what it says, but that's almost certainly a reference specifically to the Jewish scriptures. So in the New Testament, we do have an advocate for the utility of the Jewish scriptures since they were inspired. But there is also a sense in which the Jewish scriptures were kind of demoted, considered subordinate to the living words of Jesus. They were dead letters, whereas the living words of Jesus were alive. But then once you got a couple generations away from Jesus's life, and you really didn't have a good claim to having heard the words of Jesus directly from him, or directly from someone who heard them directly from him, then I think they were kind of like, I think it's time we move to text as the locus of authority. But you continued to have what they called the agrapha, the unwritten words of Jesus that would be passed around, that were considered to have special authority. But yeah, it's complex, but in the end, I think it was mainly because a lot of what is in the New Testament is trying to represent the fulfillment of prophecy. And you also have stuff like Hebrews and some of Paul's writings where so much of it is referential to the Hebrew Bible, and so much of it is about the relationship and the fulfillment of what's going on in the Hebrew Bible, that I think the majority of Christians wanted to maintain it. But there, you could go on for write whole books about all of that. Hey, Dan, is the concept of God not lying biblical? How did that dogma develop in spite of instances of divine dishonesty? Yeah, you find it in a few different places. It's in Hebrews. It's in Numbers 23:19. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a mortal that he should change his mind. But then you've got other parts where God explicitly changes their mind and God lies. And so I think you have, different writers writing in different time periods, times, places, circumstances with different rhetorical goals, emphasizing this or that feature of their notion of God. And then when it all comes together, you just have this accident of the juxtaposition of contradictory ideologies. And just like how God can be the young angry warrior, or the elderly hoary-headed benevolent loving father, you can also, if you need a God who lies, you can find a God who lies. If you need a God who can't lie, you've got a passage for that too. So just like God is the grand utility deity, the Bible is the grand choose your own adventure text. Whatever God you want, you got it. So I think that's probably, that utility is what's facilitated the preservation of all of that. And then Simone says, that's right, I need to send Hayden my additions to that list, LOL. I would love additions to that list. I keep thinking at some point I need to sit down and do that, but I just don't have the time for it, unfortunately. Keith asked, do you think any Old Testament books have a higher chance of being reliable than others? Yeah, there are definitely books and stories within books that are likely historical, and others that are definitely not historical. So, stories like Job, definitely not historical. David didn't write any Psalms. Solomon didn't write any of the Proverbs. Most of that is exilic or later stuff. But then, yeah, you've got some historical stuff. Generally, the broad strokes of more geopolitical events, big time geopolitical events, interactions with folks like Sennacherib and Hazael and things like that, that's supported by archaeological data. So, yeah, you definitely have a mix. All right, Alan, thank you so much for the question. Is Psalm 83 prophecy? No, but Psalm 83. I know how Psalm 83 ends. I forget the rest of Psalm 83 though. Yeah, I think what we have here is a hope. So a lot of the Psalms, and particularly the lament Psalms and the complaint Psalms, are yelling at God to do something, saying, "You never, we're all suffering. What are you doing? Why are you admatai? How long will you let this go on?" And then some of the assertive kind of imperative parts of the Psalms, I think are kind of like liturgical attempts to activate God's agency or will or something like that. So prophecy, no, I wouldn't call it prophecy. I would call it trying to coerce God into doing stuff. Thaddeus, speaking of comics, I can't enjoy Sandman anymore because of the Neil Gaiman news. Yeah, that's pretty devastating stuff for an awful lot of folks, and unfortunately, not that surprising a thing at the same time. Does the Bible's recording of eighth-day circumcision prove anything scientific? No. Or is it just a coincidence? I don't know exactly what coincidence you're talking about. But yeah, no, there's nothing scientific about it. Circumcision is something that you find in Egypt prior to the existence of the Hebrew people, and so yeah, I don't think there's it's proven anything scientific. Jamie, thanks so much for the question. Can you please do a response to the Wise Disciples video he did yesterday on slavery and how God wanted to gradually destroy slavery? Oh, did I? I saw a video, it might have been yesterday, from somebody who was talking about slavery in a way you shouldn't be talking about slavery. I don't know if it was that wise disciple. What you doing? Okay. Is this a YouTube channel? I don't know if this is what I saw. Give me just a second to whoop. Alex's debate tactics revealed. Oh, I'm sure that's going to be high quality. So all right, I'm gonna leave this page up. I'm gonna see what I can find. Yeah, I'd be happy to take a look at that. I don't know who this individual is, but yeah, in fact, I talk about it in my book. The idea that God was trying to shove Judaism and Christianity in the direction of rejecting slavery, and the notion that that's in the Bible is absolutely laughable. The primary catalyst for movement away from slavery was Greek philosophy. You have even as early as Aristotle, you have Aristotle saying, "Yeah, there are these guys who say that slavery is immoral and it violates the I forget exactly what the words he uses are, but basically that it's immoral and they're onto something, but they don't get it quite right." And when you have slavery pushed back against in early Christianity, it's rare, but you do see it. Gregory of Nyssa, for instance, and some others. It's always based on these philosophical frameworks, and then you have to get to the Enlightenment Renaissance, Reformation, and then Enlightenment for a critical mass of Christians to finally adopt this notion of natural law, of natural rights, of individual rights, of human rights, for Christianity to finally go, okay, we changed our mind. And yeah, so the arguments that like it's the Bible or it's Christianity and nobody else is, those are pretty silly. But yeah, thank you for making me aware of that. I'll check it out. Somebody says, Dan, repeat your quote, please. I don't know what quote you're talking about, unfortunately. Hi, Dan. Lots of love from Chile. Que hubo? In Uruguay, we used to say, que pasen bien. Espero que pasen bien. Gravity Fallout Pines. Love Gravity Falls. The voice of Dipper Pines follows me on Instagram. Jason Ritter. I knew like when I saw that, I was like, oh, cool. That's John Ritter's son. That's awesome. And then it wasn't until later that I was like, wait a minute. He's the voice of Dipper Pines. Dipper Pines. I thought that was cool. Do Christians believe that Jesus taught his gospel only to that tiny small group of people near Palestine? It's a big world. Doesn't it make sense that he would teach his gospel to many civilizations? You have some groups like Latter-day Saints who think that that Jesus preached the gospel to other societies, but for the most part, overwhelmingly, Christians reject that and think that Jesus's earthly ministry was limited to what's recorded in the Gospels, which strikes a lot of people as not a lot, but it strikes people as nonsensical, and other people it strikes them as perfectly sensible. Alec, thank you so much for the question. Recently, you have debunked some disingenuous apologetics, which is appreciated. Do you have any plans for content going forward for any apologetic material that is trustworthy and faith-building? I'm not going to endorse faith-building stuff. That's outside the scope of the goals of my channel. I'm happy to acknowledge when apologetics is trustworthy, but I don't run across an awful lot of that. Most of what I'm responding to is stuff that I get tagged in that is bad apologetics. So I'm happy to acknowledge when apologists say things right. And I have Wes Huff, for instance. I have pointed out that I appreciated a lot of the things that he said. Speaking with Billy Carson, I said many of those things in the months and years prior. But I've also pointed out that he got a bunch of stuff wrong with what he talked about on Joe Rogan, what he talked about with Billy Carson. For instance, his discussion about slavery, which also made up that notion that that God was trying to get people away from slavery. So I just don't interact enough with trustworthy apologetics to go out and champion any of it, and I don't think that's really what my channel's here to do. ML Brown, GU for a while. Should we pray from watching? I'm wondering if it matters. That sounds awful. I've doubted my salvation for years. Also, I apologize for numerous messages via email and Facebook. If prayer, sorry, I get I'm getting the plaque, the YouTube plaque sent to me for getting 100,000 subscribers. And man, I've gotten a dozen emails about the package, which is weird. If praying helps you, then go ahead and do it. I'm not here to tell people to pray, but I recognize that it can have a helpful effect for a lot of people. I think the fact that people doubt their salvation is one of the symptoms of a rather harmful brand of Christianity and religiosity, and folks who are trying to make others doubt their salvation are just, in my opinion, trying to coerce them into behaving more in line with their identity markers and their identity politics. So I'm sorry that has impacted your life the way it has. And no need to apologize. I can't even count the messages and the emails I get every day. I try to see or read as many of them as I can. I certainly don't get to all of them, and I certainly don't respond to the majority of them. I wish I could, but there are nowhere near enough hours in the day. Have you read John Barton's The Word? Got it for Christmas. Started it recently. That would be this book, How We Translate the Bible and Why It Matters. I have read a little bit of it. I'm not very far into it, but I did remotely attend a little seminar he gave at the release of the book, and chatted with him a bit. He is my Dr. Grossvater, so my doctoral supervisor was Francesca Stavrokopoulou, the inimitable Francesca Stavrokopoulou, and her doctoral supervisor was John Barton. So I have no doubt that this is a phenomenal book. I recommend every chance I get the red book right here, which is his book, A History of the Bible. this is the best history of the Bible that exists right now. So if you really want a good intro to how biblical scholarship works and a history background of the Bible, this is it. Did you read Swamp Thing? Also got that for Christmas. I've probably leafed through a really, really old copy or two of Swamp Thing, but no, I didn't read that series. Vegan Gains, thank you so much for the comment. Have you seen Christspiracy? What do you think of Jesus being vegan? I think I don't think there's strong evidence. I don't think the case is well made in that video. I think there are some problematic claims. But yeah, the notion that Jesus rejected the sacrificial system is not really supported by any data. In fact, I think the scholarly consensus is moving in the direction of recognizing that Jesus didn't really seem to have any problems with the ritual purity system either. So yeah, I can appreciate and support the rhetorical goals of that documentary. However, I think it plays fast and loose with the data, and I don't think it really makes a good case. Corey, thanks so much for the question. Does the Bible say anything about the cross of St. Peter, or is it a myth? It doesn't say anything directly about the cross of St. Peter. There's a part in John where it talks, where Jesus is talking to Peter, talking about how he will stretch his hands out and will be carried about by others. And this is taken as a reference to Peter's own crucifixion, but the actual cross itself, no, is never mentioned anywhere. Megan Evans, thank you so much for the question. How did the idea that God sent his own son to die as a sacrifice and atonement for sins develop with Jeremiah 7:31, other negative views of child sacrifice in mind because adult/willing/idea of Trinity? I think it was necessity. I think you had a bunch of followers of the Messiah who was not expected to die, who got crucified by the Romans, and suddenly it was back to the drawing board, and they had to renegotiate their understanding of the identity and the mission of the Messiah, and found the Lego brick building blocks to be able to construct this notion that maybe the Messiah was supposed to die the entire time and not deliver us politically, but deliver us spiritually. So I think it was forced upon early followers of Jesus. And yeah, the fact that you have Hebrew Bible passages that directly conflict with that is just, that's just the nature of how the Bible works. You also have God commanding child sacrifice in Genesis, and according to even like medieval Jewish interpreters and even some reconstructions of the story in Genesis, it certainly seems like Isaac may have actually been sacrificed in the earliest version of the story, because you've got Abraham setting off, leaving the young men behind, the Na'arim, the servants, and it's he and Isaac, and they went on together, and they went up together, and they did this, and then you have whatever happens on the mountain, and then the text just says, and Abraham returned to his Na'arim. So two go up, only one comes down, according to the narrative. And so there are a lot of interpreters who suggest that in the original version of the story, and even some like Jewish interpreters suggest that he was sacrificed, and then he disappears from the narrative for a while. And so one of the traditions holds that he was in heaven for 2 years before being brought back to life. So child sacrifice is there. It's deeply embedded in the foundations of ancient Israel and Judah. But I think it pops up as a result of this need to renegotiate the mission of the Messiah after Jesus got crucified by the Romans. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate your support very much. Justin, thanks so much for the question. Hey, Dan, thanks for all the good content and education you provide throughout your socials. I appreciate the kind words. Happy to do it. During your time learning at the universities, can you recall 2 or 3 moments when you were surprised from the religious studies? Ooh, and it's getting close to bedtime for me, so I'm going to have to try to wrap it up here. I see we have a lot of questions to go. I will get through everybody who has posted a question up till now, but please Don't post anymore. 2 or 3 moments where you were surprised. I can't think of many. I can recall no, that's not true. That's not true. Not necessarily religious studies proper, but studying cognitive linguistics and the cognitive science of religion, there were some aha moments where my entire paradigm shifted. And I think learning about like prototype theory and dual process cognition and things like that, that is where my whole world changed. And I learned to think about myself and how I think about the world around me and interact with the world around me in entirely different ways. So I think the two biggest aha moments for me were learning about dual process cognition and prototype theory, and then some of the other things within the cognitive science of religion, where things just suddenly clicked, and I was like, it all makes sense now. Everything else is garbage. Now I finally understand why this is how we think, why this is how things work. So yeah, I would say it's those fields that gave me the big paradigm shifting moments that really surprised me, rather than religious studies itself. Because I always kind of went into religious studies as just a sponge. I didn't have an awful lot of preconceived notions. I was just like, I don't know this stuff. Teach me this stuff. I'm here to learn this stuff, and so I just absorbed whatever I could. Elisa, thank you so much for the question. Hi, Dan. I really, all you share, I hope you mean I really enjoy or appreciate or love all you share. If so, thank you so much. You have referred to a divine council. Do you have thoughts as to which deities were in the divine council? It would have been the patron deities over the nations of the earth, as it was understood by any given group. So in Israel, they would have thought of Asherah as one of the patron deities of the Sidonians, and Chemosh was the patron deity of Moab, and Kos was the patron deity of maybe the Edomites, and they would have had a bunch of those deities. Baal of further north. Actually, they thought Baal was a Philistine deity, which he wasn't, but that's probably coming from a later time period. So yeah, your patron deities of the nations of the earth would have been the members of the divine council, whoever they were. And it wasn't always the same, and the Bible doesn't always get it right. So for instance, the Ammonites, Milcom would have been their deity, but in Judges, they're like, you take what Chemosh, your deity, has given to you. And Chemosh was not the patron deity of the Ammonites. So, but if you want a really good discussion of all the different deities that are in the Bible, you can't do better than the Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible, affectionately known as the DDD by scholars. Don't go to Anna's archive or to LibGen or to archive.org to look for a PDF of it. Don't do that. But yeah, DDD is where you want to go to learn about all the different deities in the Bible. A dog 4629 says, quick question. John the Baptist is written about in greater detail by Josephus than Jesus. Also, he is presented on equal footing to Jesus in the Quran. Was he seen as greater or equal in first century? Probably he was somebody who was making claims to messiahship prior to Jesus, and Jesus may have even been his disciple. But Jesus ended up kind of winning out. And so the people telling the story kind of renegotiate, as I am wont to say, things to make John the Baptist kind of knowingly the forerunner and kind of willingly stepping out of the way to let Jesus take over, where what makes a lot more sense historically is that John the Baptist was the leader, and then Jesus, for whatever reason, became more popular. And who knows what happened to, he might have been sent to prison and killed by the Herodians, and might have been really mad about Jesus becoming more popular than him. However, if you would like some wonderful recent discussions on the life of John the Baptist by a good friend of mine, James McGrath, he's got a more popularly oriented book, Christ Maker, A Life of John the Baptist, which is not incredibly big. And then he's got a more academically oriented John of History, Baptist of Faith discussion. They're both, and this is the subtitle is The Quest for the Historical Baptizer. So those are two wonderful books by James McGrath, a wonderful scholar, that discuss the background of John the Baptist. Josh, thank you so much for the question. Would you ever be interested being on the Holy Post, VeggieTales creators Phil Vischer's podcast, or maybe having him as a guest on your podcast? I don't really know anything about the Holy Post. I know I've heard of it. I've certainly never watched or listened to it. I'm ashamed to admit I'm not a big podcast person. So I don't know. I have no objection in principle, but I don't really know much about it. But if he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I would love to have you on the show," I'd be happy to find an opportunity to do so. Unless I poked around and was like, "Yeah, that's not for me," but that rarely happens. But thank you for the question. Emmanuel, thank you so much. Hello. Would the authors of the Genesis narrative have potentially equated the concept of exile and death? If yes, then would God have fulfilled his death sentence to Adam and Eve through exile? So that's that was I believe that was Joel's that was Joel Kritko's I think that's who it was. Yeah, I think that was Joel's argument in a response to my video. And certainly there are times when exile is compared to death, but the notion that means it's reciprocal, that when you're referring to death, you can therefore be referring to exile. I think the evidence is pretty slim for arguing that is a metaphor, because you've got, I think there are 56 occurrences of the verbal root mote, to die, in the paronomastic infinitive. The majority of them are in, I believe, the ho fall. I think the minority of them are in the call, but none of them are ever metaphorical. They're all literal references to physical, biological death. And so arguing here that the idea is a metaphor referring to exile, specifically exile from the Garden of Eden, I'm not convinced by that argument, nor are the majority of scholars. I don't think it's a very strong one. So I would say probably not. Jacob, thanks so much for the question. Why does Deuteronomy change Exodus's rationale, for the Sabbath commandment? Deuteronomy changes the rationale for an awful lot, and I don't know why. I would have to look into. I don't know the background of what scholars think about the Deuteronomist's rationalization for that. So that's not a great answer. I'm sorry, but in fact, I'm gonna have to look into that. I've been thinking I should do like a series or something on contradictory laws in the Pentateuch. Let me write this down real quick. And part of it may be the fact, because there was probably a concept of Sabbath in the pre-exilic period, but it was probably not regimented. It was probably whenever there was a festival or a king could declare a Sabbath or something like that. You probably don't have the weekly Sabbath until the exile. And so I think the rationales are probably still kind of fluid in the texts in Exodus and Deuteronomy that are reflecting on this, which are probably exilic layers to these texts. I'm going to have to look and see what discussions have been had about that. But yeah, I think the idea of a weekly Sabbath is an exilic innovation anyway. So, but thank you for exposing my ignorance of that issue. Joshua, thank you for the question. Do you feel the conflation between Baal and Adonai is overstated? Is there a chance any conflation between Yam and Adonai occurred? I don't think so, because the you still have conflict between Leviathan and Rahab and Adonai. I think there's, because sovereignty over the waters, I think, is part of the repertoire of the Northwest Semitic storm deity. But that would be interesting to look deeper into. I think the recent book by Ayali Darshan, and I'm forgetting the title of it, The Storm God and the Sea, by Noga Ayali Darshan, I think does a wonderful job of talking about the relationship of the storm deity in the different literature to the sea, and it's a conflict relationship. So I don't know that there's a great argument to make for that, but I'd be interested to see an argument for that. But yeah, I think the notion that Adonai adopted a storm deity divine profile, I think, is pretty strong. Thomas, thank you for the question. Is Deuteronomy 18 a test to determine true false prophets, or is the author of Deuteronomy presuming that the subject is already a prophet? I think it's just talking about, probably just talking about Joshua, but it could just be saying, yeah, anyone that you find in the future, because you also have in one of the closely associated chapters a similar discussion about the king. The king's got to be like this. I think the author probably had a specific one in mind, but is kind of giving a general principle. I don't think it is a means of testing true or false prophets. Hang on just one moment. I've got to catch up on stuff, do a little housekeeping in the chat, it seems like. Let me just make sure I got the right aisle here. Silver says, which Adonai conflation do you believe occurred first, Baal or El? I think, I don't know about a conflation of Adonai and Baal, but I think Adonai adopted the storm deity profile before being conflated with El. Frozen Trout says, since God lied to Adam, he could not be incapable of lying. Also go outside and touch some grass. Okay, let me catch back up. We got a lot of catching up to do. Oh man, it's already 9:15. All right, I'm gonna it's gonna be a lightning round. I'm sorry if I am not able to dedicate as much time as I would like. Yes, I don't think that's a test for testing prophets, because I think it was written to serve a specific purpose in a specific time. It was not like, let's come up with something that can stand the test of time. You're John Michael Bell. Thank you so much. You're a Bible scholar and a comic fan. Are there similarities to how biblical canon has evolved and how comic book canon evolves? Yes, you have different takes on similar stories. You have retconning, you have contradiction, you have all of that kind of stuff. I think it is a helpful lens for kind of bringing different insights to the surface. I don't think there's like a direct one-to-one correspondence, though, in the way they work. T-Shar, thank you so much for the question. I've often heard about the missing years of Jesus. Do we know where he was? Do we have any speculation? Probably just living a life, doing his thing. Notions that he traveled to Tibet and things like that, those were all invented in the 19th century mainly. None of them go back to any plausible historical reality. Arthur Buffalo, thanks so much for the question. Dan, are you a Christian with all that you know? I am an active member of the LDS Church. I'm a Mormon, but my faith plays no role in my scholarly positions, and so it does not fall within the scope of the goals or the aims of my channel. Super Sweaty Nerd Man, thank you so much for the question. How do churches adapt theology to non-univocal readings of the Bible? What are some common differences in ideology and practices between the univocal and non-univocal reading Christians? So folks who approach the Bible as non-univocal will generally try to situate the stuff in its own context, and try to understand the background and why they were presenting things the way they were presenting. Now, they will still give space for inspiration, but rather than say this is, a truth that is eternal and absolute and exists for all time and all places for all people, what they'll say is this is what God wanted these people to know in this time. And maybe over here, God wanted them to know something else. And maybe you also have the idea that inspiration must pass through an imperfect filter. And so what comes out the other side may be a mix of inspiration and the individual author's own articulation of it or own spin on it. So there are a variety of different ways to approach it. But one other thing that I would say is the main difference between those who approach things univocally and those who do not is I think you will find that the folks who recognize the need to allow the text to be in conflict with each other are frequently the ones who are prioritizing the interests of the disadvantaged and the minoritized and the marginalized and oppressed groups, because it becomes kind of hard to advocate for them through a univocal lens. And a univocal lens is frequently primarily about boundaries and power. So I think that's one of the biggest differences. Same here, Raman. Thank you so much for the question. Job 41, when it rises up, the mighty are terrified. They retreat before its thrashing. Thoughts on whether Elim could mean lesser gods, divine beings. In Job 41, I don't think that's I don't know what Elim looks like in the Hebrew. Because this is just about the behemoth, isn't it? Or is this the Leviathan? Yeah, 41 is about the Leviathan. Now, the Leviathan is certainly a divine being, a deity. It's kind of a monstrous deity. They had their share of those. But I don't think the word Elim occurs in Job 40, does it? Well, let me do a little search. I don't think we have a plural of El. Let's see. Oh, there we go. 41:17. When it rises up, yeah, that could. I see translations like to render the mighty, but that does not refer to the mighty. That's a false etymology and an outdated one. I mean, Marvin Pope in 1955 already put that idea to bed. Yeah, I would say that that could certainly mean that other deities are scrambling for cover. Somehow I have overlooked that in my readings of Job. I'm going to have to dig deeper into that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Josh, thank you so much. So were David and Jonathan hooking up or what? I don't know. I certainly think it's not outside the realm of plausibility, but at the same time, it certainly doesn't sound like something that's a story that would be included in the Bible. However, at the same time, the way David's tradition has been curated and renegotiated to fit with the ideals of the authors of Samuel, it's certainly possible that they are trying to rehabilitate a reputation that they didn't want to represent more directly. So it's certainly plausible, but I don't know. Also, does Adonai killing David and Bathsheba's young son as punishment an implication that he wasn't as pro-life as modern evangelicals insist? Oh, the God of the Hebrew Bible is absolutely not pro-life in anything remotely approximating the sense that modern evangelicals use. And, God kills pretty indiscriminately, irrespective of the gestational or even post-birth development of a person. But fetuses are treated in the Hebrew Bible as more property than person anyway. So, yeah, nobody in the Hebrew Bible is pro-life in that sense. King D. Ho, thank you for the question. Why did later editors keep Paul when Paul's prophecy of an imminent apocalypse failed? Well, it also failed for the author of Mark and the author of Matthew. And how did 2nd/3rd century readers make sense of Paul? Well, the pastoral epistles help a lot. because they kind of give you a kind of leg up on renegotiating what was going on there. So yeah, when you've got a reality you're facing, and you've got your sacred texts, and you've got your community that accept those sacred texts as God's word, you got to find a way to make it work. And so you come up with this idea of, well, there's going to be a delay. Oh, well, this is about not generation in the sense of this actual generation, but generation in the sense of this, group identity or something like that. There are a lot of different ways that that people go about it. And even today, you had plenty of people who in the 90s were like, a president who cheats on his wife will cheat on the country. You can't trust him. He's not fit to be president. Those very same people, just a couple decades later, was like, hey man, not our business if a president cheats on his wife. We're not hiring a pastor. We're hiring a leader. So you have the same, you have just rank contradiction that just gets dealt with. David Ross, thanks so much for the question. What did Genesis 3:15 refer to historically? I grew up in a sect that taught serpent seed, which has roots in white supremacy. I know about the racism behind it. All right, no snake powers yet. I think it's just an ideology for why people hate snakes. And I've been in different parts of the world where lived in Uruguay for a couple of years, and you would see snakes on the side of the road with their heads cut off because somebody saw a snake. They would freak out. They'd run and grab a hatchet and they'd go and kill it. Irrespective of how harmless the snake was. So there's a lot of hatred of snakes out there in the world. And yeah, I think this is just an etiology for why people will stomp on snakes and why snakes will try to bite people. It's kind of an Aesop's fable in that sense. And I apologize for mispronouncing this, but the Spanish in me wants to say Jamiel, but I don't know if that's accurate. I apologize if I've mispronounced that. Brother, you're really a breath of fresh air in today's world. Much love. Thank you so much for the kind words, which makes me feel doubly bad if I've mispronounced your name. Chicken Nugget, did Marcion's gospel come before the four gospels? No. It was probably, Marcion's version of Luke was probably adopting, if not the fourth, then a close third gospel. Mark and Matthew predated Luke. John may have predated Luke. Luke may have been written in the early 1st century, but I think Marcion's version predates the addition of the first 2 chapters of Luke with the nativity story. And somebody tells me that Esther Amori also translates the Elim and Job as such, the gods in God's monsters. I would expect nothing less of Esther. I'm very glad to hear that. And if you don't know about Esther's book, God's Monsters, I would highly recommend it. Again, I have not been able to find anything since I redid the book. There it is. Esther's a phenomenal writer. I am very envious of her wit and her creativity in her writing. God's Monsters, Vengeful Spirits, Deadly Angels, Hybrid Creatures, and Divine Hitmen of the Bible. And she even signed my copy very kindly. We've been wanting to get her on the podcast, but things have just not worked out as well as we would have liked. But yeah, highly recommend that book. Where am I? Okay, the Church of Korihor. Thank you so much for the question. Do you think that the pocket gospel in the Ascension of Isaiah is likely from the original Greek? I've got to be honest, I don't know. Hang on just a second. I'm not going to be able to dedicate enough time to this. So let me tell you what. I will take a note of this, and I will find a way to find an answer. Every now and then we run across stuff that I have not looked at before. Okay. I have taken note of that, and I will find an answer. Thank you for the question. LJ, hi, Dan. Thanks for showing us that Jesus is not God, but is the Son of God. That's certainly the way that Jesus is represented throughout the Gospels. Brooks, thank you so much for the question. Do you think Isaiah 1:11 through 15 can be interpreted as a condemnation of all worship it kind of read like that to me. No, that is the prophetic critique. The idea is not that this kind of worship is bad. The idea is that the people who are engaging in this worship are the wealthy and the privileged, and they are engaging in the outward performance of piety while grinding on the faces of the poor and the needy and neglecting justice and exploiting the justice system and the economy to advance their own self-interests. And because justice and mercy and righteousness are the goals of the law, all of the other stuff is intended to generate a merciful and a just and a righteous heart. If you engage in the performative features of the law and then entirely undermine its purpose, then you are sinning. And that is the central message of the prophetic critique. So it's not condemning worship. Alan, thanks for your answer. Folks I know think the current Haxa thing is the Psalm 80. Gaza thing is the Psalm 83 war. Yeah, no, that's asinine and that's dangerous rhetoric. And I think far too many people are getting way too giddy about the fact that millions of people's lives are being ruined and destroyed and ended. That's just ghoulish. LJ, I've just read the paper titled Another God in John 1:1. What an amazing read. Yes, Alexander Samarius is a wise Greek linguistic scholar. Thanks for the recommendation. I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's an interesting discussion about how John 1:1 could be referring to Jesus as a secondary, non-competitive God that fits fine within the early Jewish monotheistic ideal. And there are a bunch of other arguments that could be made about that. Like Justin Martyr thinks of the Logos as another God. Philo thought of the Logos as a second God. And the idea is that the Logos is this expression of God's rationality. And you had a difference in Middle Platonic philosophy of the word in mind and then the spoken word. And once it's spoken, it's separated, but it is still unified in will. And so Justin Martyr's like, it's different in number, but not in will. And so the Logos is a second other deity, according to Philo and Justin Martyr. And you even have Athenagoras and Theophilus, who, they're all kind of borrowing from Numenius's Middle Platonism a little bit, but talking about the Logos as a separate deity, emphasizing the unity and the distinction in different ways. So, yeah, it's a cool paper. Check it out. Orsak, thank you so much for the question. Do you have a book of the Bible you enjoy the most, something you find particularly inspiring and moving? The Gospel of Mark, always my favorite gospel. I have translated it into I'm creating a kid's translation of the New Testament, so designed for like a 10 to 12-year-old readership, and I've already finished the Gospel of Mark and a couple of others, but I really enjoyed translating the Gospel of Mark. That has always been my favorite. Jamie, thank you so much. Wise Disciple IP defends this on Timcast. Okay, yes, I see that. There it is. Yeah, defends this on Timcast IRL. Okay, I have the video. Thank you for verifying that. K-Fly Esquire. Hey, Dan, huge fan. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work. I will. I appreciate it. Wanted to know if you have heard of the theory of holy fear and if you have any thoughts. I don't know about a specific theory named holy fear, but it certainly sounds like the idea that that you're supposed to fear God. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but certainly the idea of fearing and being in awe of God because of how much they could mess you up is an element of ancient ideas about humanity's relationship to God and the appropriate demeanor in the face of the divine. But if you're talking about something more recent or something that just has that name but has a different content, I'm afraid I haven't heard of it. But I don't think if you are talking about the notion that fear of God is the beginning of wisdom and that kind of stuff, I don't think fear is an appropriate motivator. Excuse me. Gravity Fallout Pines, just for fun, 10 years ago, everybody loved Star Wars. It's since dropped off a cliff. How do we fix my beloved Star Wars? Thanks. I enjoyed the first half of the Skeleton Crew, not so much the second half. The the finale, I thought, excuse me, I thought was not what it could be. Didn't like Boba Fett, Andor, and The Mandalorian. I thought were great, but yeah, how to save it or fix it, I don't know. I'm not a filmmaker or a TV whatever person, not a law talking guy. Corey, thank you so much. Was Peter actually crucified on an inverted cross? That's the tradition. We have no way of knowing if that is accurate or not, but I think most scholars would say maybe, likely. And obviously an awful lot of scholars really want it to be accurate. Orsak, thank you so much for a question. I was very impressed by Rene Girard's theology. I was wondering about your thoughts on scapegoating as a biblical theme. It plays such a small part in the Hebrew Bible, and there's so much that we don't know about it. And so when people approach that theologically, I think there are an awful lot of gaps that they have to fill in. And we don't really have the frog DNA to fill in the gaps and the missing dinosaur DNA to be able to do so in a way that really has a genetic connection to what really happened. I think people fill it in ways that make it meaningful and useful to them. So I don't know that there's much we can say beyond the fact that there was this weird unknown ritual that seems to have something to do with some demonic figure that occupies the periphery of human civilization that had something to do with atonement. Gwen, thank you so much for the question. Dan, I would like to continue our conversation from earlier. From Twitter. I would appreciate you reaching out to me. I sincerely appreciate your expertise. I appreciate your comment, and I have not returned to Twitter, and I will revisit where we are. Was it Twitter or was it Facebook? Might have been Facebook. I don't remember. But I will look into it and see if I have anything else to add. But thank you for reaching out here. David, thank you so much for the question. Hey, Dr. Dan. Hey, David. I am limited by not knowing the languages. Any suggestions for free or inexpensive resources for biblical Hebrew? There are some YouTube channels that will take you through a kind of rudimentary introduction to biblical Hebrew. If you can find some that are being provided by authors of textbooks, and there are some of those. Miles Van Pelt. I'm screwing up names. I think it's Miles Van Pelt. Yeah, Miles Van Pelt has a Basics of Biblical Hebrew workbook with Gary Pratico, and I'm pretty sure he's got a YouTube channel, and it might be associated with like a more robust program that you can pay a little bit for, but certainly YouTube is probably going to be the best you can do for free. But at the same time, doing Hebrew and Duolingo is a good way to learn the alphabet, pronunciation, some vocabulary. Modern Hebrew is different from biblical Hebrew, though, so you got to be aware of that. JJ, I'm curious about the Book of Mormon. You shared you don't believe it is historically accurate, but I assume you view it as scripture. Can you elaborate? Thanks. My personal faith doesn't play a role in my scholarly position, so what I'll say is that the data don't support the historicity or an ancient origin for the Book of Mormon. The data suggest that its origins are to be found in the 19th century. And yeah, apart from acknowledging that I'm an active member of the LDS Church, I don't really talk about my faith other than that. So I apologize for having to disappoint in that regard. Tony, thank you for the question. Oh shoot, I've been neglecting my my Discord. So to Pope and Greenstein, Dorm amends it to Galim. Oh, yeah, that is interesting. But yes, iffy. That is not from memory. I looked them up. Huh. Well, thank you for filling in the gaps in my knowledge. Sorry, Tony. Can you talk about your views on the theory that our Gospel of Luke is an expanded version of Marcion's? Just heard this today. So the idea is not really that Marcion wrote a gospel and then like somebody else took it over and expanded it. The idea is that there was this gospel and Marcion was like, I like this gospel. This fits with what I like. And the degree to which Marcion may have fiddled with the gospel is not clear, but there are an awful lot of scholars who suggest that this was a recently written gospel and that later on there were some things that were added to it, and particularly the nativity account at the beginning, because that provides a rather human natural birth for Jesus, which would conflict with the kind of docetic Gnostic view of Marcion that Jesus was not born through natural processes. So I don't know that the Marcion's version of Luke would have differed that much from what we have now. But I don't think many folks would argue that Marcion composed it or it was composed for him or anything like that. I think the idea is that he adopted this gospel that already existed. Il Defenso Robles, thank you so much for the question. Is it true that Jews' theology changed once of Josiah's time, then after the Babylonian exile? How accurate is this? Asherah, Council of Gods, etc. I think ancient Judahite and Israelite and early Judean and Jewish ideologies and dogmas have always changed. Excuse me. But yes, I think the main pivot points could be identified with Josiah, with the exile, with the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 70 CE. I think those crises represented the greatest catalyst for change in their ideologies. And then also the Greco-Roman period, the interaction with the Greco-Roman world and the rise in literacy, I think influenced a lot as well. Jimmy Snow, thank you so much for the question. Would you ever discuss your personal faith in a venue that may seek to bring or ask you to address challenges to it? I don't have any plans to do that. Don't have any desire to do that at the moment. I'm far more interested in sharing the scholarship than I am in talking about just my own personal faith. All right, hold on just a second. Somebody's making trouble in my neighborhood. All right, we're just going to do that real quick. Okay. But thank you so much for the question, Jimmy. No, I don't have any plans anytime soon, and my I would say my disinterest is at the level that I don't know if anybody could afford to change my mind. Bagelman B, thank you so much. Thoughts on W. Dahmer's argument that the meek shall inherit the earth is best translated, the oppressed shall take possession of the land. I think that's a lot better than JP's "You Should Be a Monster" reading or tergiversation. But I don't think I would translate it that way. I think you could interpret it. That would be an interpretation that I think is plausibly included in the semantic field that is in view there, but I don't think that I would translate it that way. And I apologize if I have neglected my Instagram crowd. Thank you so much, folks, for hanging out. Yes, yeah, unfortunately, between the super chats and my Discord server, which is made up of Patreon subscribers, unfortunately, Instagram folks get the short end of the stick, and my attention, I'm not able to turn as much attention to Instagram, so I apologize for that. But I figure that folks would prefer I at least include them on the stream rather than just not include them at all. But let me see if there's anything I can respond to real quick. More questions about Marvel Rivals. No, I don't play Marvel Rivals. I'm not a big video game person these days. I just don't have time. When is at DRAD Fry getting on the podcast? I don't know that I know DRAD Fry, but it may just be because I don't recognize the username. Do you believe Lazarus could be the author of the book of John, as he refers to himself as the one who Christ loved? No. It talks about Christ loving a variety of different people, and that presupposes the historicity of the account. So I don't think that argument has much behind it. Okay, one more question from Jimmy. Thank you so much, Jimmy. I ask as I run the line. We've got a lot of friends in common and want to support and collab with you, but as a queer exmo, I also wish to know if income that support would go to the church. Yeah, at this point, I don't think I would have an interest in talking about that, because I've said that I don't talk about it on my channel, but if I talked about it somewhere else in public, then it would become fair game on my channel, and one of the results would be something that is one of the reasons I don't talk about it, is because I don't want to be flooded with those kinds of discussions and be distracted from what I'm trying to provide with this channel. So just in order, one of the reasons I don't talk about it is because I would like the content on my channel to remain focused on what I've set up as the scope of my channel. So no, I don't think I would have an interest in going outside the boundaries I've set up for my channel in another venue. So as I have had to do a couple of times tonight, I have to apologize for disappointing. But yeah, I can understand your concern, and I'm sorry that dynamic has to carry the weight that it does. I understand and appreciate your concern, but yeah, I don't think that's something that I would be interested in either way. So again, apologies for disappointing. Okay, it is way past my bedtime, and I've got to work in the morning. Sitting right here making videos, but it's still work. I appreciate your time, everybody. I really appreciate your support. I mentioned in a video earlier today that we just passed 900,000 followers on TikTok, which is incredible. Not something I've ever would have dreamed of when I started up this channel. Y'all make it possible for me to do something for a living that I never dreamed I would be able to do. I get to just argue about the Bible on the internet for a living, and that's about the coolest thing in the world. So thank you so much for your support. And thank you so much for some wonderful questions. And again, to those that I disappointed, I apologize for that. That's kind of the nature of the beast here. But I appreciate y'all, and I hope you have a wonderful night. I hope you have people around you who love you and support you, and enough food on the table and a warm, safe place to spend the night. And yeah, I will see you all around. Somebody asked on Instagram a minute ago if I regularly do live streams. I try to do 1 or 2 a week. If you sign up for my Patreon, you have priority access as long as the window's in front of me through a live stream channel there. And then you also get notified about at least 1, but depending on your level, maybe 2 scheduled live streams every month. So you can plan to be there if you have that, if you have interest in that. So thank you again, everybody. I am going to go to bed. I hope you all have a wonderful day, night, afternoon, wherever you happen to be, and I will see you around. Bye, everybody.